This is our first session for Liferay DevLife. So this session is really an introduction on what these series of sessions are all about, and how you can use it. You might learn a little bit today, but we're going to have even better sessions in the next few weeks. So every 2 weeks we will be doing this series, and so the goal of these sessions is, number one, to not try and be a one-way presentation. So it's very interactive. As community manager, I love to see people learning from others, and so we have people on. We'll have Bruto on later. We have an IRC room. We have a couple of other tools that we're going to go through and kind of describe how to use them. So you won't see me very much except at the beginning here. I'm going to switch to my screen share and kind of show you what this is all about, if I can figure out how to do that. So screen share, I'm going to screen share my entire desktop here, and we're going to have an infinite loop for a moment as I get rid of this. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see my desktop here. So I have a browser, a web browser. This is actually Google Chrome. And this is the home page here, which I don't want to start the video. So this is the DevLife homepage, and this is where most of the information is. So the home page itself has a dedicated viewer in the middle here, which you can see. Every 2 weeks when we do these videos, you'll be able to come here and watch. You can click on the big button to make it big. And then below there is an IRC window. IRC, if you're not familiar with IRC, it stands for Internet Relay Chat, and it's basically a chat room. You don't have to have an account. You just kind of give your nickname, so hi there, and the name's already filled in for you, this channel name, and you click 5498 to fill in the CAPTCHA, and you click connect, and then it'll automatically join the session, and then you can interact with the speakers or the session leaders, as well as anyone else that happens to be on the session. So, hey there, here I am. So there's actually a bit of a delay. So when I speak, it takes anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds for our audience to hear it. So just keep that in mind if something's happening and you're not familiar with, or you don't know why it's happening. Okay, so that's it. So mainly for people who want to read only these sessions, they don't want to participate, you can just sit on this page, watch the video, ask questions every once in a while if you have questions, or just hang out. But really what these sessions are about are for more interactive experiences. So these are developer sessions, and so I expect most people to be developers. There's no minimum amount of development experience that you have to have. Basic familiarity with software development in general definitely helps. If you have Liferay experience, that's even better, because all of the topics that we cover as part of these series will be specifically for Liferay developers. They're not going to be generic tech talks where we talk about some random new cool technology without mentioning at all how it applies to Liferay. So it's really about building your Liferay experience, getting you involved in our community, getting you interacting with me and with others in our community, and really just learning a little bit. We're not going to do huge, expansive overview sessions either. So there's not going to be sessions like Intro to Portlets or 0 to Expert in 60 minutes with Liferay. We're not going to do that. It's really about focused topics that you can participate in and learn small bits of information and go off on your own later and maybe explore on your own. So each session will have a specific goal that you will reach by the end of the session if you are participating. So that's kind of the main goal here. The reason why we're doing this is because Liferay is a great technology, but number one, there's a steep-ish learning curve, and so we want to expose as many people as possible to development tasks within Liferay. And if you do it enough times, if you're a beginner like me, you'll start to build this toolbox of knowledge and toolbox of processes that you'll follow, and it becomes very easy to do future projects. The other thing is, as I said, Liferay has some really cool technology, but it's really about the people. It's really about you guys getting together and learning things together that you would not have possibly learned or taken the time to learn if you weren't, if you didn't know this, or if you didn't participate, or if there wasn't this series of videos available or hangouts, you wouldn't do it, and you just wouldn't learn, and you'll keep putting it off. So I highly, highly encourage all of you that are listening to me now to be prepared to participate either today or possibly in the next couple of weeks as we go along. So, okay, so the home page again has the video and the IRC. IRC is primarily the way we'll interact. There are other ways to do it, like with if you're on our YouTube Live page, you can type in YouTube comments. If you're on the Google Plus page, you can also make comments there as well, and they'll show up in our dashboards. So if you have questions, feel free to shoot them out. I would prefer if you use IRC and you prefix your question with the word question in all uppercase. So for example, here's my IRC window. Let me drag this over so you guys can see it. So this is an IRC client I use, which is not in a browser. It's a Mac app, and you can see the comments there from Mr. Jardine about how Chrome sucks. So if I wanted to ask a question, I would say question. Here is my for a response. So the leader of each session will be monitoring that, as well as myself, and when they see questions come across, they will answer them as quickly as it makes sense. So just make sure you prefix your question with question, and don't ask it multiple times. There's a log, and all of us can scroll. So yeah, so for IRC clients, if you want to participate in IRC, you can use the web version on the browser on the home page, or you can use your own IRC client, like this one's called Colloquy, C-O-L-L-O-Q-U-Y, and there are others like Adium, A-D-I-U-M, and MIRC on Windows is a very popular one. If you just search for IRC client, you'll find ones. No need to go through all of that. So I recommend having a separate browser because, for example, when I leave this page, I'm going to get kicked out of this particular room. I won't get kicked out. I'll just end up leaving. So yeah, so okay, so that's the home page. So as far as the sessions go, starting today and every 2 weeks from now until eternity, we will have another one of these sessions, and they will last generally from 60 to 90 minutes. Maybe less, maybe more. There's really no fixed time limit. It's kind of up to the leader how much they want to talk about. It's not going to be 4 hours long, though. Of course, I think at 90 minutes we'll probably pull the hook out and drag them off stage. But so every 2 weeks we'll have sessions. There's a calendar link on the home page, which you can see here. Actually, let me zoom in. Hopefully this makes it bigger for you guys. There's a calendar link. Yes. I want to leave the page, move it over here. Okay, let me move this off of my screen so that doesn't get in the way. Oh, there's my Eclipse. Okay, so there's a calendar link. This is actually an embedded Google Calendar, so you can subscribe to it. There's links up here, or if you're more familiar with Google Calendar, you can just plug in the URL directly into your client. But you can see this is the month of July. All of these times are in GMT. Because we have a worldwide community, that's really the only time zone that makes sense. So right now it is, let's see, what time is it? It's 2:12 GMT. So we started at 2 p.m. So again, all the times are in GMT. You can change that on your own calendar if you subscribe to your own local time. But right now it's 10 a.m. in New York, 7 a.m. in California. 4 p.m. Central Europe, and then it gets later from there. So, so all of our sessions will begin around this time. It's kind of the best time zone. I know there's somebody who's always going to get screwed over that. I think in this case it's Asia, either or Oceania, I should say, Japan, China, and Australia. So local time, Beijing. It is 10. Oh, it's not too bad. 10 o'clock at night. I think Sydney is going to here. Okay, so it's midnight in Sydney. So, yeah, so this is the best time zone for everyone. Most of our developers are in US and Europe. We do have a lot of developers in Asia, but just that's kind of historically where they've been concentrated. So I tried to pick a time that worked for both. There will be a couple sessions later on where they're a slightly different time, but basically this time of day will be our sessions. Okay, so today's the 29th, so this is my session here. You can click on it, and you can see a link. There are more sessions. So in August, we will have, on August 12th, we'll have Bruno Farash, and then on August 26th, we'll have Olaf Koch. You can browse this calendar and see what the sessions will be about. If I go even further, we'll then we'll have Mate Thorzo from our Hungary office, Tomasz Polosowski on the 23rd of September around on hardening Liferay. And then, for example, on October 7th, we're going to be doing a live stream of one of the developer topics from one of our symposiums, in this case, the one from Boston. And then you can, we'll have Andrew Jardine on the 21st of October, one of our more active community members. Ray Auger will actually do a stream from DevCon, and Eduardo Garcia. And there's many more really great sessions from subject matter experts, and I really highly encourage you guys to get involved and join the sessions and actually interact. So how do you interact? That's the question. So let's look at the next tab on the homepage. It's called Upcoming Sessions. So I have the 3 upcoming sessions here listed. You can see there's mine, which we're talking about today. Each session kind of describes what it is, but more importantly describes the setup, what the prerequisites are, what you need to download and install, for example, if you're going to participate. So in this case, for my session today, it's actually a really basic session. You need to have Liferay Portal. Pretty much every single one of these sessions, you will need to have Liferay Portal installed. You can choose CE or EE as community manager. I always choose CE, of course. So I have Liferay 6.2 running on my system here. You also need Maven, or if you install Eclipse, the Liferay IDE, it will have an embedded version of that. But if you have your own, you can use that. We'll be doing a Maven exercise today. And then Liferay IDE, installed and configured to deploy portlets to that Liferay instance that you have installed. So I hopefully, if you're intending to participate, you have this or some environment like this. Essentially, we're going to be writing and deploying portlets. But in other sessions, like Bruno's next month, it'll be a little bit more involved. Like you'll need an Android SDK, developer tools for Android, and Liferay IDE with the mobile SDK plugin, or sorry, the Liferay mobile SDK plugin installed in the IDE. I don't believe that it comes by default, but maybe Bruno can clarify later. And then so basically, for sessions, upcoming sessions, check the upcoming sessions page, set up your calendar to notify you of upcoming sessions, and be sure and understand the prerequisites for attending the session. If you miss sessions, of course, everything we do here is recorded automatically, which is why I chose Google Hangouts to do this. So once I end the session, Google graciously creates a video and sticks it on YouTube on our dev channel. And then we'll list it on this previous sessions page here. So if you miss a session or you want to go back in time, you can click the previous sessions. There are none right now, obviously, because we have not had any sessions yet. As I mentioned, I'll go to our YouTube channel. So I have a quick link here if you want to get to the YouTube channel. And I actually have more links, so I want to go to the final tab here, the About tab. So this is kind of about what we've already talked about, some of the links for some of the tools that you will typically use in a development environment with Liferay. And then some pointers on how to get the most out of your session. Basically what I said today just now. Watch the calendar, find the sessions that you're interested in, join our IRC room, ask questions, plan to stay for the entire session. We're going to create a forum thread on liferay.com for each session where we can have any follow-up conversation for asking questions after the fact, like if you run into something after the session is over and you want to ask the session leader a question, you can do that through the thread. Okay, so then there's these external resources page. What we're looking at here is just a liferay.com page. It's essentially a static page with some embedded, like the embedded calendar and the embedded YouTube video and the embedded IRC client. We are using, as I mentioned, Google Hangouts on Air to do this broadcast. To do that, you need to have a Google Plus page and a YouTube channel. So you can click on these links here and get to the page here. You can join them, or you can add them to your circles. You can get links back to our YouTube page, got contact information. We'll be populating this with additional posts as we go along in the series. And so that's the Google Plus page. You can also click on the YouTube link to get to our sessions here. You can see the session that we're running now is already there. It's a live session, so if I clicked on this, you can actually watch live directly from YouTube. You don't have to go to the embedded page. So I encourage you all to follow this this particular channel or subscribe to it. There's 14 subscribers so far, and I just created this page a couple days ago. So yay, 14 people, awesome. So okay, so let's go back to the page. Okay, so again, the previous sessions are listed here, and then the About page. Okay, so let's see, what else? So for interacting with the session and following along, if you're just sitting there and watching the video, that's not, I mean, it's fun, but it's better if you interact. So I want to show you guys exactly what I mean by interact and what a typical setup is. So depending on how many screens you have, I actually have 3 screens here. If I could turn, let me show you guys what I have going on here. If I could figure out how to do that. Okay. Yes, the camera. Oh, I need to turn on my screen share. That's the problem. Okay. Screen share. Okay. So I'm going to grab my camera here and kind of make you guys dizzy for a moment. Actually, let me set up my screen first. So what you will want to have generally is a browser, whatever your primary developer tool is, whether it's Liferay IDE or IntelliJ or NetBeans or VI or whatever you use. A text editor, you know, kind of your typical development tool. So I'm going to show you guys what I have here. If I can see what this looks like. Yeah, so I've got 3 screens here, as you can see. There's my IRC screen, the Liferay IDE, and then I have my Google, my browsers down here. So if you have more than one screen, I highly recommend that that you try and have those primary tools open. If you only have one screen, you can still do it. Let me share my desktop again here. Okay, it's just you'll be stacked, right? So you'll have an IRC screen, you'll have your browser on top, and then you'll have your IDE. So it's really up to you, but the point being that you're not just going to sit there and watch the video. We're going to be using these tools in a moment. There are other tools listed here, like a command line. I'll be running some command line stuff, possibly you know, GitHub, or things like Collab Edit, which we'll also be using today. So you have a wide range of tools that you'll be using that leaders of each session can use. It's really up to the leaders depending on what they want to use. You're not forced to use any particular tool. The main goal here, again, is to make you guys interact, participate, and learn, not learn some fancy new tools. So it's fun to use new tools, but it's not the primary purpose. Okay, yeah, thanks, Juan. So one of the screens is actually a laptop, and the other one, you may have noticed the logo, the sun logo. It's one of those screens that happen to have gotten lost in the Oracle acquisition. I'm not sure how it ended up here, but it's here. Okay, so next. So let's see. Let me make sure I cover everything. Oh, okay. So the last thing before we get into the session itself is volunteers. So as I mentioned, we're going to have a number of sessions. We have some people already signed up. I really, really want others in our community to participate and actually lead sessions. So please email me or instant message me. I don't care how you do it. Get in touch with me. Oh, we also have a normal, or I should say, an ordinary Liferay channel on IRC. So we're in the Liferay-dev.life. We have a Liferay channel, which right now has around, I don't know, 25 people in it. And I'm always there. We have a number of other people that hang out there. And it's a really great way to meet and ask questions and get kind of real-time help, but more importantly, get to know your community. So that's another way that you can get in contact with me. So if you want to run a session and you have a good idea, let me know. Again, they're not one-way sessions. They're really meant to be interactive. This first part is one-way because we're starting from zero, so we got to go in one direction only. But once we get into the more interactive sessions in the following weeks, you'll have a lot better experience as far as interactivity goes. So if you want to run a session, if you have an idea, if you know something about doing Liferay development, please get in contact with me. Just as a reminder, these sessions are highly focused. They're not meant to be overview sessions. They're not meant to be boil the ocean, learn everything there is to know about something in Liferay, unless it's really focused. So for example, today we're going to create simple configuration screens for a portlet. We're not going to learn all there is to know about Java EE development. So again, if you have an idea and you want to present, it's actually not only is it good for you, is it good for our community, it's really good for you for public speaking, building confidence in front of groups of peers. It's a really great way to just kind of build yourself up as a person. It's not just about the technology. Again, it's about the people. So you'll be meeting some interesting people. People will be knowing you and learning that, hey, you're the expert on that one particular API that you did a session on. That's really cool. Thank you for that. And it feels good to give something back to the community. So I again highly encourage all of you to run a session. We have slots open. I think we have actually one slot that's going to be coming open in September, I believe, or October. And then we have many slots later on. And if this proves popular enough, it doesn't have to be every 2 weeks. It can be every week. This session for me is kind of heavyweight for me because I'm doing most of the talking and it's an introductory. But once we start scaling out and we get other people doing it, I'm just kind of the party planner. So we could do it every week, for example, if it proves popular. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, so having said all that, so the typical way this will work is we're going to have a walkthrough of some idea in Liferay. It's again not going to be a big, giant, expansive overview, but there will be some expectation that you're not just going to watch, and you're also not just going to copy and paste one big, giant block of code. It's kind of instructive to do it in small chunks. So instead of just I don't know, copying a file from GitHub to your local machine and pushing a button, it's a little more interactive than that. So let's see what that's all about. So again, this session today is about portlet config screens. Very simple concept in Liferay. We'll be using Maven, and the reason why I wanted to use Maven is because up until about I don't know, probably 2 or 3 months ago, I knew that we had Maven support, but I never used it because I just, again, didn't have time to learn it. it's yeah. So I never had time to learn it. I never tried it. But then I was working with the guys from Vaadin, and they're huge Maven fans. A lot of Maven users, a lot of popularity of Maven exists in Finland, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to try it out because we're trying to do some cool stuff with Vaadin. They all use Maven, so I'm going to give it a shot, and I'm completely convinced that it's the way to go compared to the plugins SDK, the Ant-based thing. If you really like Ant, you can stick with the plugins SDK. It's fine. It's not evil. It's just it seems like Maven is a much better solution because of its the kind of what is it called? Something by convention. Instead of you having to explicitly code, or instead of Liferay having to explicitly code paths and so forth, Maven kind of gives you this. It makes some assumptions that make sense and make your project much more modular and much smaller. So with the plugins SDK, you have to download a whole bunch of stuff. There's directories that you'll never use, like hooks or ext or layout templates. With Maven, it's very compact, and it makes a lot of sense, at least to me. And the dependency management is really cool too, which I think is the main benefit. So a caveat for my session and for probably everyone else's sessions, we don't know everything. I have no idea some of the weird command line switches for Maven. I know what it does at a top level, but I'm not a deep expert. So I've only been using it for a couple months. So yeah, so a question about Gradle. So I'm in the same boat with Gradle that I was in Maven about 2 months ago. I've heard it. I know kind of what its supposed benefits are, but I have not used it yet, so I can't really comment on how awesome it is. It seems kind of awesome. It seems kind of like the JavaScript for build systems. It's like, whereas like Java is like all this strongly typed code and it's very easy to catch things at compile time. Gradle seems more permissive and friendlier to scripty kind of people, but I haven't really used it yet. So maybe Chris_N, a future session on using Gradle to do something would be really great, because I would definitely attend that and play with that. I know we are using it in Liferay internally, so we have some people that are using Gradle, but I don't know the extent to which we're using it, and I also have not used it myself. So yeah, so I just learned Maven. So I didn't really learn it. I just kind of I learned it a little bit more than I learned Git. Every time I have to do something on Git, I have to basically go back and read all the man pages again every single time. For some reason, it just won't click. So Maven's a little bit better than that, but okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to create, basically, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to create a project in Eclipse. We're going to create a portlet, a Maven-based portlet, deploy it, and then write a configuration screen for it. So typical development workflow for Liferay IDE or for Liferay in general is to create plugins and deploy them, make sure you don't get bizarre stack traces, and then go and start changing it. So that's what we're going to do here. So I have already installed Liferay IDE. I basically went to download it. So if you haven't downloaded it and you're just watching, is where you want to go. And there is somewhere in here Liferay IDE downloads. So it's under Liferay projects. So click on Liferay projects, Liferay IDE. So you can download it here. I basically just downloaded the bundle, Eclipse Luna plus IDE 2.1.1. This was just released about, I don't know, a month ago, or maybe less, 3 weeks ago. It's got some really cool features. Most importantly, it's completely self-contained, so I don't have to install any plugins. It just, everything's there. Once you install it and run it, you can go ahead and create a new project. So we're going to create a new project. I've already set up my server down here on the bottom left here. If you have not yet done that, during the project creation process, you will be prompted to do that. So install Eclipse IDE, install Liferay. I've actually installed it into this directory called lr/devlife. In here I have a Liferay directory which contains Liferay 62, and also an Eclipse directory which contains IDE. So Liferay IDE is a set of Eclipse plugins. So if you wonder why I keep using Eclipse and Liferay IDE interchangeably, it's because I kind of use them as the same thing. I don't usually use Eclipse other than when I'm using it for Liferay projects. So I recommend Liferay and Eclipse in this self-contained area for development purposes, for DevLife purposes, in fact. I also don't recommend doing any of this on a production server, but I know some of you probably will, so have fun with that. Where did my IRC channel go? I'm looking for questions. Okay, so move this over. Yes, so question from Dennis. Yes, that is a typo. I will go fix that momentarily. Or actually, I'll fix it after the session. I think most people, if you actually use the web client, it'll work here. Okay. So again, I have Liferay installed and running. I have Eclipse installed and running. I have a server associated in Eclipse with my Liferay DevLife server. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. So to create a new project, there's a bunch of ways to do it. I'm going to do it the file new way, which everyone knows for the last 20 years. We're going to create a new Liferay plugin project. When you install Liferay IDE, you get these magic menu items. So Liferay plugin project, and you'll get a wizard. And this wizard walks you through the creation process. So let's call it the build type is important. Since I don't even have a plugins SDK, I've sworn off of it for now. I'm going cold turkey directly to Maven, so I'm going to choose Maven, and you can change the version here if you want. I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to leave all the kind of defaults. If you've not used Maven before, so we'll talk about profiles in a moment, but I'm just going to pick the one I've already set up, which is here. And I'll talk about these in a minute because I want to show you the actual files for the profiles. Okay, the plugin type, we're going to create a portlet. You can create other types of plugins for Liferay, but we're concentrating on a portlet for today for configuration demo purposes. We'll include the sample code. We're going to use the Liferay MVC framework, which is kind of one of the simplest ways to create a portlet. If you're a JSF guru or you like Vaadin, you can use both of those with Maven now. In previous versions of IDE, you could not use Maven with Vaadin, so now you can. So thanks to the Vaadin team and to the IDE team, they did an awesome job working together to make that a reality. So okay, so we'll just click finish. It goes and creates a bunch of stuff under the hood, and you're left with this directory here, which you can see. So before I get into it, a lot of people are kind of want to know what's happening under the hood. And while I don't fully understand Eclipse's magic, I do understand there is a workspace. Let's look at this directory. So there's this a bunch of dot files, which for beginners like me, I just ignore. They are configuration files for IDE to remember the build path and some Eclipse specific settings. Essentially, what you're going to get is a source directory and a file called pom.xml or pom.xml. So this is the Maven file. This is the file that describes the project, and all these other directories are basically standard directories for a standard Maven-based build. So in Plugins SDK, if you were familiar with that, in the ant build files, that's where the directory names and so forth were specified. With Maven, there are same defaults like this source main Java, source main resources, and source main web app. There's also a test directory, which you don't even see here. But essentially, Maven makes it easy to create projects using standard directory names and structures. So that's what you see here. So it's the same in the file system as it is in Eclipse here. So I'm going to stick with Eclipse just for simplicity. Okay, so the XML file this POM XML. Let's look at the source code first without getting distracted. Okay, so this is the file. This is essentially like, it's akin to the Ant build files. It describes the project, and it says what to do. It has essentially, well, they used to be called targets, but now they're called goals in Maven, but they're essentially the same thing. And there's some random stuff in here. The main thing to find is the way you identify the plugin itself, your project name. You have a group ID and an artifact ID and a name and a version. This is standard software development concepts. Nothing new here. And then there are some plugins that go into Maven itself. These aren't Liferay plugins. These are Maven plugins that happen to know about Liferay. For example, you find configuration items like the auto deploy dir or the app server deploy dir. These are, as you can see, are variable, and they change depending on your environment. So if you're installing into your home directory, these need to evaluate to something different based on your environment. And the way that they evaluate to something different is through that profile that I was mentioning. So these get evaluated by looking at, well, the profile is evaluated, and then these values are modified at build time. So if you see, if I mouse over this and hover over it, it will tell me exactly what the expression, the dollar open bracket expression, evaluates to. And the way that, again, that evaluates is because I have a profile. So the profile is, you can get to it in Eclipse if you go to Preferences and then Maven, and then I believe it's under User Settings. So there's this file, and the path here is going to be different if you're on Windows, obviously, but it's in the .m2 directory on my system. So, sorry, the settings file is here. So if I want to see that settings file, I can click Open File here, and it'll actually open the file directly in Eclipse. So here's where the values get translated. So I have several different profiles here. I have one called Liferay 62-GA2, Liferay 62-France, and then at the bottom here I have the DevLife one, which I'm using right now. So in this profile, this is where the rubber meets the road, and those values are actually specified as hard-coded paths. There's a lot that Maven experts do with these profiles, and I'm not really one of those power users. You can have these profiles be evaluated based on an environment variable. Like, say, if you're running on Windows, it'll take one profile, versus if you're on Unix, it takes another profile. Or if you're running a specific Java version, you can change the stuff. But this is just hard-coded, and I have a name here which I specify in my project. So I have Liferay version 6.2.1. I have my deploy dir set up here. I have my Tomcat directory. So all of these, again, are used to essentially replace the values in the project file with actual hard-coded values that work. So when I run the build, it'll actually do what you want it to do. You want it to deploy to your system. Okay, so that's essentially it. This is the only file that's kind of Maven specific for most projects. There are other settings down here, like, for example, the dependencies section specify what other projects your project depends on. Because this is a Liferay plugin, my plugin depends on the Liferay SDK or Liferay APIs to be able to compile and run. So these are listed as dependencies, and these special group IDs are essentially well known. You have to know that it's com.liferay.portal and the artifact ID is portal service. Liferay IDE will set all this up for you, but essentially these are well-known identifiers for Liferay's libraries, and they are represented through the repository, which holds all of these artifacts. They're called artifacts. They're essentially jar files. And so you can see them if you go to Maven Central. You'll find a link here. This holds artifacts for many, many open source projects, and I think some closed source projects as well. But if you just type in can see there's tons of different things. The one we want is com.liferay.portal here. So if I click on it, you can see the different kinds of artifacts that exist under com Liferay portal. These are essentially corresponding to the jar files of Liferay, like portal impl or portal service or portal web. These are jar files that need to exist to build your project, and they need to exist at runtime as part of the Liferay deployment. So by specifying them here in my com file, they are automatically brought in and used as part of my build. And so it makes it very easy to do like type checking for Java or Java JSP files. And typical Java IDEs depend on that strong typing to make sure that your code is correct before you even build it or deploy it, or as close to correct as possible. So this is essentially a dependency resolution mechanism that Maven provides. It's really nice. And again, all of this is done from this one POM XML file, which is kind of the main reason why I like Maven. I know the dependency resolution is probably more complex and more valuable overall, but I just like the simplicity of projects. And then, so you can post this on GitHub, put it in a repository on your GitHub account, and you don't have all those other ancillary files that you'll never touch, and it can confuse people from the plugins SDK. Okay, yes, that's a very good point. Azazel, yes, Azazel. So these artifacts that you see are CE Community Edition artifacts. The Enterprise Edition artifacts are on Liferay's own repository. I think it's called repository. I think that's it. Yeah, it's a little bit slower. We don't have as much money as Maven Central. So I don't remember. I think the EE ones are in a private directory. EE is our Enterprise Edition for Liferay, which is under commercial license. So I don't think we're going to find. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we're going to find com Liferay portal here. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. So, yep. Here it is. So 621, yeah. So these are just the CE versions. Well, that's kind of interesting. It's under JBoss. Oh, that's why. Yeah. So for Enterprise Edition customers who are also Maven fans and want to use Maven for Liferay EE, I believe as part of the package you get when you sign up is you get access to the repository with EE artifacts. So, but for the ones on Central, they're CE only. We had a bit of a I'm not sure what happened. It was some versions didn't make it onto Maven Central. For example, there's no 6.2.0 GA1 for portal impl. If I click on all here, you can see we go 620 milestone 5, 620 milestone 6, 620 beta 1, and it goes all the way up to RC5. But there's no 620 like final release. Okay, but there is 621. So starting from now, I think we've got our act together, and future releases of CE and all of the artifacts associated with it will show up in a timely fashion right after the release. We're actually tracking Maven downloads as well as part of our community metrics. So yeah, so Maven downloads are certainly important enough to track them. Okay, so let's move on. So by specifying this here in my POM file, when I run my build, it's automatically going to go to the Maven Central and grab the necessary artifacts and bring them down. Including the com Liferay portals, as well as others like JavaX Servlet and JavaX Servlet JSP, and you can add more down if you want to use like the JSTL libraries, which we're not doing today, but essentially you can put in anything here. You can put in Vaadin dependencies, you can put in all kinds of stuff. The scope that you see here is called provided, so that basically says when I package my project, don't include a copy of the Liferay jar files, because they're provided by the runtime, so my project doesn't need to include them. In fact, if you do include them and change the scope to something else, your project most likely is going to fail spectacularly because there'll be like class path conflicts and so forth. Okay, so I have my dependencies, I have my plugin, I have my sample code, which was created for me as part of the Liferay IDE support for Maven and its archetypes, which I don't, well, briefly I'll get into it. So a Maven archetype is basically a blueprint for a project. So it says where which files should show up and what the contents are. So this Vue.jsp file that was automatically created for me, that's part of the archetype, which says, okay, when you create a project of this type, put this file here, and this is the content that it has. So my very simple portlet, it's a Liferay MVC portlet. It uses JSPs for its Vue technology, very exciting and it's cutting edge. So I'm going to drag and drop this onto my server. That's how you deploy. And one way to deploy. There are many ways to deploy. You could right-click here, and you can say Liferay, Maven, Liferay deploy. There's a whole bunch of other targets which we don't have time to go through, but I like to drag and drop, and the reason is because when you do that, and I just missed, I think. Yeah, when you do that, IDE will associate that project with your server, and so when you update some of these files, like these JSPs, it knows how to magically make that file change without having to do a redeploy. There's a fancy term for it, but it basically doesn't do a full redeploy. It just touches a file somewhere deep down in the guts of Tomcat. So, for example, if I change the string here, it's immediately reflective. Okay, so let's go check out my my server here. So I'm running Liferay. I thought I was. Okay, so I'm running Liferay on localhost. These are all default values. This is what you will get. This is what you'll see right here when you install Liferay for the first time. So I've already logged in. I'm just gonna go create a page and stick my portlet on it. My portlet. So add page. So I'm basically just added a single page to Liferay. So if you're doing this at home, go ahead and add a page. It's completely blank, so I can click welcome to get back here. I can click my blank page again. Again, to add a page, you click the little plus button. Question, is there an available .gitignore useful for Maven-driven project? That is a very good question, Jack. So you can use the one from Liferay itself. So if you go to GitHub/Liferay/Liferay portal, I believe there's one in here, somewhere in here. This one here. So this is a pretty useful one. It's a pretty big one actually, but it's very specific to Liferay for building Liferay itself. So a lot of these you might not need, like all the portal webs and the portal impls, because unless you're building Liferay itself. But some of the more generic ones, like these up here, will be useful. Also, Git has as a default set of gitignore. So So GitHub itself has different gitignore files for different technologies. Yeah, and there's a good one from Bruno, Maven, which is, I think, basically here. Yep. So it's in this big list. So there you go, ignore POM XML files, anything under target, the release properties. It's a pretty simple one, but it should work. So again, you can use that one, or you can use the one from Liferay, or combine them and make a giant awesome one. So, okay. So this is my config, or my project. So I created a page on Liferay. I've created a project in IDE. I've not done anything to it. I'm simply going to add it to my page. So click on Add, click on Applications, and I think I called it My something. Yeah, so here it is, My Super Config. It shows up under the sample directory. And if I drag and drop it here, eventually you'll see the content of the JSP file. This is my super config. And again, this is a very simple portlet, very typical use of JSP. If I go in here and change this and add an exclamation point or a whole bunch of them and hit Command S or Control S to save it, the IDE automatically syncs it. So if I go over here and hit reload, you can see it immediately is reflected in the portlet itself, which is kind of nice. Okay, so that's my portlet. Very exciting. Now, typical portlets have what we call preferences. And preferences are basically settings. So, for example, if I go to the sign in, the web content display, I'll add another portlet here. The ginormous asset publisher. So, typical portlets like the asset publisher have settings because you want to change how it looks and what it shows and how it behaves. And those are accessed via this little gear icon at the upper right. There's a whole bunch of settings for the portlet. Under configuration, for example, there's this setup tab which has all of the configuration for the portlet. This is actually probably one of the most complex and awesome looking configuration screens. We're going to make one that's not quite this awesome, but essentially it's a way for administrators and users to configure the look and feel and behavior of specific portlets. Now, as a portal or portlet container and as a portal in general, Liferay adheres to the portlet standard, JSR 286. And that standard specifies multiple different ways to configure portlets. There's actually a preferences mode for each portlet. The difference between that typical portlet preference mode and what Liferay exposes is that portlet preferences via the JSR way are generally used for individual user preferences, whereas the Liferay configuration screens that you saw there for Asset Publisher and others are generally used to configure the portlet for the all users across the site or in a particular scope. So it's more common to do that these days. I have not seen very many people using the portlet preferences, the traditional preferences mechanism, because people are not wanting, I guess, I'm speculating that administrators and site owners want to have a consistent and predictable look and feel for their sites, and so they don't want end users typically changing things for most kinds of sites like corporate intranets. That's not true for public-facing sites and others, but generally you configure the portlet to behave in a way that's specific to the site itself, not for an individual user, or you have configuration directly in the portal itself, directly in the portlet itself, so that you're not going to this config screen at all, and it's just you've got like a button like on Google Mail. You can click, compact, lazy, and comfortable to configure the display style of the portlet. You don't have to go to some administrator-looking screen. Because when you may have noticed when I click configuration, there are other settings like permissions, communication, and sharing, and these are really not generally used by end users. Well, maybe the sharing one is, but permissions are generally left up for site administrators, not for end users. Okay, so we're going to be using Liferay's configuration to create a configuration screen, much like you see for Asset Publisher. So let me remove that guy and go back to our test page. Okay, so we're back on our page. You'll notice my custom portlet has a gear icon, and if I click on configuration, I can get some stuff here. There's permission and sharing, but there's no setup. There's no nothing. The way you accomplish that in Liferay is you add a setting to your portlet config file. In this case, it's the Liferay-portlet.xml file. This is a file that is part of every single Liferay project. It's under the webinf directory. You can see it here. If I double-click on it, the default settings here have to do with mapping the JSR permissions to Liferay's, or JSR role definitions to Liferay's. But we're going to concentrate on the config stuff. So to add a new configuration screen, the first thing we do is specify a configuration handler class. This is a very typical pattern in Liferay to add a handler class to your portlet, portlet XML file, and then you add you implement the file or implement the class. So the configuration name or the name of the entry is configuration something. I can't remember what it is, but of course Liferay IDE has autocomplete, so I hit that and I start typing con, and there it is. It's configuration action class. You can see the other ones that are like that, but this is the one I want. So if I hit enter, it's going to fill it in. Okay, so this is how I specify the action class for configuration. Now, the next question, what's the class you put here? So you can add your own class, and you can implement the appropriate interface, but Liferay has, much like Maven, some sane defaults that you can reuse without having to write any Java code at all. So I'm going to do that. So I can't ever remember the class name. So with IDE, I can go up here and I can say navigate, open type, or open type in hierarchy. And it'll give me this autocomplete thing. So I know that all of the Liferay classes that are provided to me start with com.liferay. But the actual class name is like configuration something. So configure default configuration. So this is all documented, by the way, so if you wonder how I'm memorizing this, I'm not. But here it is. It's default configuration action. This is a implementation class that all of our developers are free to use. So if I click on it here, it opens. You can see the type hierarchy here. I can't remember the package name, of course, so if you right-click on it and say copy qualified name, it'll just copy the fully qualified class name. And then I can go here with my mouse and hit paste, and it sticks it in there for me. Now this default class provides basically preference getting and setting for me, so I don't have to write any of the Java code to do that. So if I just hit save here and let Liferay IDE do its thing, when you change an XML file, it does have to do a full redeploy so that it rereads those files. But okay, so it completed here. So if I go back here and oops, wrong button, and I go to my config page, now you can see I have a new tab which is called Setup, which is completely blank because I haven't created anything for it yet. But you can see the change that made. It basically says, okay, Liferay knows that I want to create a config page for this portlet, and so there it is. Okay, so now the next question, how do you create those pages? So let's close my type hierarchy. So it's basically this file and the Liferay MVC framework basically look for JSP files based off of settings in this portlet.xml. So if I look at portlet.xml, this is another of the Liferay portlet configuration files. And there is a setting in here called view template. This is what you see. This is how it knew to put that content in the view itself. It came from this view JSP file, which is this my super config exclamation point. So there's another one that we need here, which is a config template, and that specifies which JSP file to use for the configuration screen. So I'm going to stick another one in here. You can stick it in, you can type it in, or you can use the GUI essentially to put in an initialization parameter here. So you can see here, IDE basically just reads the XML file and makes this pretty graphic. And I'm going to add a new one called config template. And the value is going to be /config.js. This basically says for configuration screen, I want you to use this JSP file, which doesn't actually exist yet. So, but in any case, if I switch back to source, you can see what that change did. It just stuck in a new initialization parameter here. Okay, so here's my view JSP. I want the config JSP to be right alongside it. So that is basically meaning I want to put a new file into web apps directory. So let's put a new config page in the web apps directory. So right-click on web apps, say new, and just say file, and we'll call it config.json. It's going to be completely blank, which is always fun. Okay, so if I stick something in here like that looks like a good config file, and I save it, and I save my other portlet XML, which should cause a redeploy. And if I reload, in theory, I should see that. So there's my Hello Computer config screen. Very exciting. Okay, so let's replace this with something more interesting. So my portlet right now is also very boring. So what we're going to do is stick in something that we can configure. And it's going to be something very stupid. So I remove that. So Liferay has a set of underlying services like user service and role service and layout service and all kinds of services. They are, at the end of the day, rows in a database. So to typically visualize those rows, you use a table, like a data table, because the vast majority of applications are data-driven applications, CRUD apps, as they're commonly called. So I'm going to stick in a search container, and because I can't ever remember the APIs, again, I'm going to just drag and drop this Liferay UI search container, which basically writes the code for me. So I'm going to drag it here, and the class I want to browse, again, I can't remember the name, so I'm going to click Browse. I just want to visualize a list of the users. So I type in user. All of the entities in Liferay start with com Liferay portal model or com Liferay portlet name model. So you know you have the right one here if you've got the kind of the base one. So double click. It knows not only the name of the class but also the fields that I can browse. So I want to see their create date, their full name, and their screen name. And that's probably all I need for now. I'll stick in the user ID too. Okay, so this is going to basically create a table that can search users. So I click Finish, and it pastes in a whole bunch of junk, and I get a whole bunch of Eclipse errors, which is typical. It's kind of sad, actually, but it's typical because I don't have, it doesn't know to put in a bunch of other stuff. So, for example, the user local service util, it doesn't know what that means because there's no import, just like a Java file, there's no import. You have imports for JSPs. So here's the quick way to get rid of this stuff. So for class imports, it's just double-click it, erase it, and start typing it again, and hit Control Space, or I think it's Control Space on Windows, it might be Alt Space, but basically autocomplete. And if you find it, user local service util, if you import it that way, it'll automatically stick in that import that you need up here, which you can see, which is kind of nice. Let me zoom in for you guys. Okay, so there's some other ones that are like Liferay UI, so it doesn't even know what Liferay-UI means. Again, because it didn't get the import properly. This is probably an improvement that could be made for Liferay IDE, but we have the imports here for your cutting and pasting pleasure. I'm going to just drag and drop the Liferay UI tag-lib import from there to here, and you can see it sticks it in, and if I save it, now my things start disappearing more. So let's see what else. Liferay UI. So this bug is actually a bug in Eclipse. There's no way to get rid of it that I could find, but it's harmless and should be ignored. But all of the other stuff seems to work. Yeah. So this is my portal. This is my portlet now. So if I save this and go back to my screen, I should see something a little bit more interesting now, hopefully. So now my app is a table of users. And you can see these are all the users that come out of Liferay out of the box. And so I've got this app. This is my super cool directory app. There's pagination. These are all features of the Liferay search container. The create date is actually a date. So if you change this text to column date because it's a date. Hit save. Now it's a little bit friendlier as far as the column goes. Okay, so awesome portlet using Liferay's out-of-the-box search containers. So now I want to configure this thing. I want to add a configuration object. And because we're out of time, I'm going to do something very simple. I'm going to make a background color, the background color of the app be configurable. And I'm going to do it in a really, probably wrong way, but I don't really care. So you'll get the idea. The point here is not to teach you proper XML or web HTML coding. It's more to look at the configuration stuff. So style, and I'm going to, oops. Okay. Back. That. And stick the ending div down at the bottom below here. Okay, so I want to be able to my background color. And you can see there's an error here because this variable is unknown. So let's stick that guy in. String. So this is where we want to fetch the preferences. I did an autocomplete there. There are many objects that you get for free via this portlet define objects. One of them is the preferences for the portlet itself. So if I type in portlet and then hit Command or Control space, I can then see this is the one I want. Dot, and then get value is the one I want, and the name of the preference that I want to get is BG color, and the default value, in case there is no default, it will be red. Okay, so hit save. Now this error disappears. Now it's going to try and get the preference called BG color and fail because it doesn't exist yet, but it's going to use the default of red. So if I reload this, I should get a red background here. Okay, so now that we've set up our portlet to respond to the value of the preference, let's look at our config screen and see how we actually set that. So our config JSP is blank again. And so the first thing we want to do is stick in a form for setting the field. So I'm going to cut and paste this snippet in, and I'm going to do something here and stick it on a page that you can copy and paste from. So there's an online text editor called Collab Edit, and I'm going to create a new document and stick this code on here for you guys. If you go to this, and I will paste this on, I'll paste this in IRC. If you go here, you'll be able to see it in real time, and you can actually edit it if you want. But I'm going to copy and paste this into my JSP file here, maybe. Okay. So I have this form, and again, I've got tons of errors. Yep. So Dennis has a very good point that these tons of errors that I'm getting are because of the missing imports. Typically, you don't stick it at the top of every single one of your files. You put it in one file, and you then import that one file. And Dennis actually uses it by adding it to the web XML of the portlet. Yeah, so you can also stick it in other places like web XML to make it kind of a standard import for all of your projects. But I kind of want to show you what a typical procedure for getting rid of them when you're starting out. So AUI : is unknown. So again, there's an AUI import, which gets rid of a lot of that stuff. Configuration URL constants is a class in Liferay, which is also unknown because it's not been imported. So there it is. So you notice I just start typing it. These values are URLs that I need, which I will show you how to create using the Liferay portlet render URL. So here you go. So I'll stick that in here as well. Oops. So copy and paste some of this stuff into your form, and you'll start getting an idea of what's going on here. So Liferay portlet also unknown, so I need to drag that over. Oops. So save that. Things start disappearing. BG color unknown, so we need to get that out of 10. It's a good idea to actually wrap these preference getters with a getter util. So there's this thing in Liferay, and it basically is, oh nice, deals with nulls and blank values and kind of standardizes the what you get back from it based on what you give it. So portlet. Okay, so now we have our colors, and we'll get rid of this for now. Okay, so now we have a config screen which has an Allo UI form. It's basically an HTML form with a select option to select the default, or sorry, to select the preference color that you want. Now, the most important thing in using the default configuration action class, which is what we're using here, if you remember, we have this guy here. It handles all the getting and setting in the database, and the service, you know, the processing the action when I click save or submit, and setting it in the database and then returning it later. It handles all that, but it depends on you using a name of preferences dash dash, and then the name of the thing that you want, and then another dash dash. So I can set this to whatever I want, but whatever I set it to is going to be the name I have to use later on elsewhere to get the value of that preference. So as long as my form, or my form uses this for the variable name, then the preference will get set properly using that name, and then I'll be able to retrieve it later. So that's really the only thing to remember using that class. So you can have multiple ones here. You could have a form that has, you know, hundreds of fields, which Asset Publisher actually does have. And as long as you use this standard naming convention, it will automatically do all of the saving and getting. You don't have to remember the dash dash bit when you're using the Preferences API. The only time you have to use the dash dash bit is in the form itself, because this is the values here are read by the action handler when I click this button down here. When I click submit, it's going to send this across, and then it's going to retrieve that, pick apart that string, know that the preference name is actually BG color, and then save the value. Okay, so portlet preference is unknown, so I also need the object definition, and that is in, I believe it's one of these guys. I can never remember how that's. Oh, it's Liferay portlet define objects. Let me see if I can find it here. Here it is. So it's under the portlet tag lib. So drag this here. Okay, so I got my objects now. Of course, portlet is unknown. So again, you don't usually do all of this every single time, but I find it highly instructive to do it at least once to understand what's going on here. So they're just missing imports. This would probably work if I deployed it, but okay. So there's my final import I need, and save. Okay. So I should be good to go here if I go back to my screen. So let me copy and paste this into. If you're playing along at home, you can now copy and paste the full setup of that. And I'm getting messages from my wife, which is kind of embarrassing actually, but oh well. Okay, so let's go back to my screen here. Hit reload. Now, if I go to my config page, I should find my AUI form, which I can find here, and I'm going to change it to pink. Let's change it to blue. Now let's try green. Hit save, and now my background color is green. So anything in this portlet can be configured using that mechanism. and you simply need to, if you're using JSP, which many of you do, you can get the value of the preference using this API portlet preferences.get value. Okay, so and then the config page, as I showed on the copy and paste area, was here. So it basically gets the current value, shows a form with the current value, and allows you to change it. And then the submit button pushes it back. We have a class which handles it for us. They say getting and setting of that preferences value. You can have your own, again, custom class here if you want. If you want to handle the getting and setting in the database on the server side yourself, but it's very easy to use Liferay's built-in stuff. Also, I keep mentioning JSP, so you're not restricted to using this with JSP technology only. If you want to use JSF or Maven or Gwt or whatever framework you happen to like, these APIs are Java APIs, so if you're using whatever technology you're using, as long as you can make a call to a Java API or JavaScript, for example, we have JavaScript services, which I don't have time to go through. You can also call it from there. So don't feel like you have to use JSP. It's just a very simple and instructive way. Okay, so you'll notice the copy and paste thing. So this collab edit website. So this is one way of doing it. There are other ways, like for example with GitHub gists. So like gist.github.com. I could have stuck the same code in here, and I don't think I have JSP in here unfortunately, but you can get Java. So if I give it a test on JSP, oh, it does have JSP. Cool. So, and of course it doesn't do any actual syntax highlighting. So this is another way that you can create interactive sessions. Okay, I don't see any questions. So I think we're getting close to the end here. So I'm just looking for if you guys have any questions. So if you have questions, post them in IRC. You'll notice, if I go back to my screen, Bruno Farash is also with us, I hope. Yes, he is. And if I turn off screen sharing and move this back over here, yeah. So Bruno Farash is a developer at Liferay on mobile technologies. He's in our Brazil office, and he's actually going to be the leader for the next session 2 weeks from now. So I asked him to join and kind of give us a preview, kind of a taste of what you're going to learn next week. We'll skip all the introductory stuff and we'll get right to the cool stuff with Bruno in 2 weeks from now. So, hey Bruno, are you there? You seem to be muted.
I'm here. I'm here now.
Hey, so yeah, I can hear you. So what can we look forward to next week?
So I'm planning to build an app, an Android app. I'm not sure yet which kind of app or which API I'm going to use. I'm still thinking about it. Any suggestion or any type of app you want to see?
Well, so SMC already did the the forum app.
I think the easiest would be doing a bookmarks app. It's pretty easy to use the API from bookmarks, and it's pretty simple too. So I was thinking about this, like managing your bookmarks from an app, but I don't know if it's too simple.
No, I don't think it is. Is it going to be an Android or iOS? Or both? It's
going to be an Android, yeah.
Okay, Android app.
I'm going to use the Liferay IDE with integration. We have an integration for the mobile SDK. I'm more used to the IntelliJ, but I would try to use our own IDE and integration for creating mobile apps.
Okay, and so what do people need to do beforehand? I know we'll put it on the website, but just briefly, like what do you need to install besides Liferay IDE?
Yes. So within the Liferay IDE, they need to add a new plugin, the Liferay Mobile SDK plugin. They should be able to install from there, from inside the IDE. So it's
do they need to install the Android SDK?
Yeah, that as well. They need to download the SDK and I think the IDE does it for you as well. Yeah, so it's pretty simple.
Okay.
I'll put the instructions on the webpage you mentioned.
Okay, and so the ultimate goal in 2 weeks is to build an app, an Android app, using Liferay Mobile SDK to manage your bookmarks and really learn about how the mobile SDK works and how you call Liferay services from a native app.
Yeah, so I'm going to show how to call our services, our remote services, like how to list bookmark entries, how to add them, how to delete and update, like a CRUD app as well.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, sorry, I was stuck on me. So now everyone can see you, Bruno, not just me. So say hi.
Hi.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll end for today. We're almost at 90 minutes. Next week will probably be shorter because we'll skip again all of the introductory stuff. And if you are watching this on the replay, just know that August 12th will be our next session. So be sure to check the prerequisites and hopefully you learned something today. I know it was kind of basic building portlets. It's not super exciting, but you got to know the Google Hangout interface. You were able to use IRC. I see a lot of you on IRC. That's awesome. And you learned about the website. So, and you got to meet Bruno, if you haven't met him already. Bruno is actually, I'm sure all of you have met him in one way or another, because Bruno is also known as Bruno Admin, and he was the default admin and still is the default admin user.
I usually don't wear these glasses, but I'm wearing now just so people can recognize me. It's just, it doesn't work, it's just a fake glass.
Nice. Yeah, so he's Bruno Admin, and his picture is all over Liferay starting in 5.2, I think, and through 6.1. I didn't see you on 6.2 anymore, Bruno. I think you got...
Yeah, they got rid of me, yeah. Too sad.
Okay, so we'll close for now. Thank you again, Bruno, and thanks to everyone else for joining today. I know it went long, and we will see you guys next time. So, signing off for now. See ya.
See you.